I am Delaney Kessler, a 32 years old woman. I'm a real estate project analyst based in Charleston, South Carolina, and 2 years ago, I found out my sister had used my identity to buy a $780,000 beach home. What I did next cost me more than a house. It cost me a sister. The day it all began was just like any other warm sun soaking the Charleston skyline, the usual coastal breeze brushing against the rusted railing outside my loft window, and the distant echo of a tourist carriage clattering along King Street. I remember sitting at my desk, drowning in a spreadsheet full of property comparables and zoning overlays when an email pinged. Just another pre-approval offer, nothing out of the ordinary. Until I saw the name. Delaney Kessler. Subject: Welcome to your new homeowner's policy. Property address: 407 Palmetto Crescent, Myrtle Beach, SC. My eyes narrowed. I didn't own property, not in Myrtle Beach, not anywhere. I clicked it open, expecting a phishing scam or an error. The message was detailed with policy numbers, a coastal storm rider, and a start date from 2 weeks prior. And the strangest part, everything looked real. I brushed it off. An administrative glitch, probably. The insurance world misfires all the time. But then, over the next few days, more letters arrived at glossy mailers for home improvement loans, new furniture catalogs, even a water utility statement. All addressed to me. All linked to the same unfamiliar address. I didn't panic at first. I'm an analyst. I trust systems to a fault, maybe. I told myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. Then the call came. It was a Tuesday. The kind of sleepy, humid Charleston afternoon that makes you move slower without knowing why. I had just poured myself a third cup of coffee when my phone rang from an unknown number. Hi, this is Roger Withers from Lark Mortgage Group. I'm calling to confirm some final details for your property refinance, Palmetto Crescent, correct? My stomach dropped. I don't have a property. I'm not refinancing anything. A pause. You're Delaney Kessler. Yes. Another pause. Ma'am, you're listed as the primary owner on the deed. You signed closing documents 4 weeks ago. I stood there unmoving while Roger listed off my full name, social security digits, and the address again. 407 Palmetto Crescent. I hung up without a word and sat on the edge of my bed, the phone still clenched in my hand, the low whir of my ceiling fan spinning like the beginning of a panic attack. I wasn't prone to anxiety, not the dramatic kind, but in that moment I couldn't breathe. I call my sister. No answer. Again, voicemail. Again, you've reached Macy, leave it after the beep. I left a shaky message. Hey, it's me. I know this sounds insane, but I think something happened, something serious. There's a house in Myrtle Beach and it's in my name. Call me back, please. She didn't. That night I barely slept. I kept flipping back through old text threads with Macy, trying to find anything, any hint of this. I remembered her saying something vague a few months back, something about getting in early on a coastal deal, but she hadn't said much beyond that. I hadn't pushed. We weren't close like that anymore. We used to be. But after Mom passed, something shifted. I thought it was grief, turns out it was something much darker. The next morning, I got in my car and drove north, 2 hours and 12 minutes. Past the marshes, through the sleepy inland neighborhoods, all the way up to Palmetto Crescent. The GPS led me into a new development, modern beach homes built on pilings, every one of them pristine and soulless in that rich coastal way. Then I saw it. White modern siding, navy shutters, a wraparound deck with glass railing, a driveway lined with crushed shells, a black BMW parked neatly in the shade. Macy's car. I parked a few houses away and just stared. The house was beautiful but sterile and surreal, like I had stepped into someone else's dream, only to find my name etched into the foundation. I walked up the steps. The keypad lock glowed. I typed in my birthdate just to see. Click. The door opened. My legs felt like jelly as I stepped inside. Cool air rushed to meet me, along with the faint smell of new paint, saltwater, and vanilla candles. Everything was polished perfect. A tray of wine glasses on the kitchen island, a gray wool throw draped over the couch, a sweatshirt hanging off a bar stool. University of South Carolina. Macy's alma mater. This wasn't a coincidence, it was a setup. A fraud. A theft. A betrayal. I moved slowly, checking the desk drawers. The Wi-Fi router still had the password taped to it, my full name, followed by 123. I opened the app and checked the admin panel. The account was registered to a Gmail with my name slightly altered, a dot in the middle, one I never made. The email used to finalize the deed. The utilities. The mortgage. All mine. But none of it mine. I sat down at the dining table, shaking, and pulled out my phone. I called Martin Travers, a real estate attorney I'd met through work. He wasn't just sharp, he was fair. Someone who didn't just chase loopholes, he believed in protecting people from being trampled by them. Martin, I said when he picked up, I need to hire you, it's personal. What happened? My sister, she used my name to buy a house, a $780,000 house, and I think she forged something, maybe everything. He was silent for a beat. Come in tomorrow, bring everything. I spent the rest of that day in a motel down the road, avoiding the questions I wanted to scream. Why would Macy do this? Why not just ask me? Why not include me? Why turn me into a ghost inside my own identity? The next morning, I brought Martin a folder. It was barely organized, screenshots, letters, printouts, scribbled notes from the house. He scanned through it, eyebrows climbing. This is elaborate. She used a medical power of attorney, I said. From years ago, back when Mom was sick. We had one drawn up in case I ever needed someone to act on my behalf. It was temporary, emergency use only. She kept it. Martin flipped through the paperwork again. Looks like she used that as the base. But here, see this? She modified it, changed the expiration date, submitted it with a notary stamp I don't recognize. So it's fraud. It's a blend, it's forgery, misrepresentation, and identity theft. But here's the catch, she listed you as a co-owner. Technically, you do own 50% of that house. I felt like I was falling. So what do I do? You can report her, sue her, or sell your share. I blinked. What? You own 50%, you can force a sale, she might contest it, or buy you out, but legally you have rights. It was the first time the fog lifted, just a little. I had power. Not much, but enough. That evening, Macy finally returned my call. Her voice was light, dismissive. You saw the house, didn't you? Isn't it amazing? I could barely speak. You used my name. I didn't steal anything, she said. I made you a stakeholder, you're welcome. My hands trembled. You forged legal documents. I made an opportunity. You're always so passive, Laney. I was helping you. I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. Helping me by hijacking my identity. You're listed on the deed, you'll get half the profits. Then buy me out, I said, today. A beat of silence. You're making a mistake. No, you did. I hung up. The sun was setting behind the motel curtains as I stared out at the glowing orange sky. I didn't want war. But she declared it. And this time, I wasn't going to play the role of the good little sister. The motel room had that stale, recycled smell like forgotten AC filters and bleach-covered secrets. I sat on the edge of the thin mattress watching headlights flash through the drapes and whispered to no one, this is really happening. Not a nightmare, not a misunderstanding. My sister had taken my identity like it was hers to use, not for survival, not out of desperation. For power. For profit. And for the first time, I felt something hard forming in my chest, not anger, not grief. Resolve. The next morning, I went back to Charleston. I didn't call Macy, I didn't text. I just went silent, let her wonder what I was doing, because truthfully, I wasn't entirely sure. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to confront her emotionally, I was going to beat her legally. I spent that day gathering everything, every document I'd ever signed. Old power of attorney papers, medical files, my credit report. I requested my IRS record, and sure enough, there it was. A 1098 mortgage interest form. Filed under my name. On a loan I never took. Macy had gone deeper than I thought. I met with Martin again the next morning. He wore the same slate gray suit and thin-rimmed glasses that made him look unbothered by anything, but even he seemed tenser than before. She's smart, he said, flipping through my documents. But she's getting sloppy. Leaving a paper trail this obvious tells me she thought you'd never look. Because I never have, I said bitterly. My whole life I just let her run things, make decisions. She said jump and I always bent instead. Well, Martin said, you're standing up now, so let's talk options. He laid them out like chess moves. Option 1, file a civil suit for identity theft and fraud. Public messy, could take years. Option 2, go criminal, press charges, bring in law enforcement, potentially see her prosecuted. Option 3, use your 50% ownership rights and force a sale of the property. Quiet, strategic, devastating. I leaned back in the chair, heart pounding. If I force a sale, do I have to talk to her again? No, he said, we file. She gets notified through her attorney. She has the right to object or buy you out, but we control the timeline. That last part stuck with me. We control the timeline. For once, I wouldn't be reacting to Macy. She'd have to respond to me. I went home and sat in my small loft apartment, staring at the whitewashed brick walls, the desk cluttered with zoning maps and commercial site surveys, my normal life. My careful, quiet life, the one Macy had never understood. And I opened my laptop. Filed the petition. 3 days later, Macy showed up at my front door. No warning. I saw her through the peephole, glossy ponytail, tight black jeans, perfectly ironed blazer, and my pulse spiked. She rang the bell twice, knocked once. Then spoke. I know you're in there. I didn't answer. You're not going to win. You think this makes you strong, it makes you petty. I stayed quiet. You're burning the bridge, she said. Don't forget I built it. Then she walked away. I didn't sleep that night. I kept picturing her eyes, not sad, not scared. Calculating. A week passed, the court served her, and like Martin predicted, she didn't buy me out. She contested. Claimed I had verbally agreed to invest in a joint opportunity. Filed a counterclaim, alleging breach of verbal contract. Martin rolled his eyes when he read it. She's reaching. I stared at the ceiling in his office, nauseous. Will the court believe her? Not if we get the right leverage. That leverage came from an unlikely place, my own paranoia. A few months ago, when I'd updated my phone's security settings, I'd accidentally left audio recording enabled on my messaging app. Every voicemail, every call, saved in a private server. Including the one from the cafe. When she'd told me flat out, I made you a 50% shareholder. Martin smiled when he heard it. This is gold. It proves she acted alone. No joint plan, no agreement, just her making a move and retrofitting the story later. We filed it as evidence. The judge scheduled a hearing within 30 days. That same day, Macy sent a text. Name your price. No emotion, no apology, just a line. I didn't answer. Because the truth was, it wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the imbalance. I'd spent 3 decades accommodating her, letting her be the loud one, the leader, the decision maker. When Mom died, she swooped in like a business manager for our grief, taking care of everything while I nodded and let her. But not anymore. She had crossed a line she couldn't uncross. And I was done being quiet. I showed up to the preliminary hearing in a navy blazer I'd borrowed from my friend Jessa. She called it my armor. It was too tight in the shoulders, but I wore it anyway. Macy arrived in white, clean, confident, the picture of innocent success. She didn't look at me, but her lawyer did. And for the first time, I saw worry behind those gold-framed glasses. The hearing was brief, procedural. The judge ruled that there was sufficient cause to move forward. Macy's team pushed for mediation. We agreed. It was scheduled for early March. A neutral mediator, small office, just the 4 of us and the truth sitting between us like a live grenade. When the day came, I didn't wear armor. I wore black jeans and a soft gray sweater, comfortable, grounded, real. She wore lipstick like a weapon. The mediator introduced himself, then opened with the basics. You both have ownership. The goal is to determine how to resolve that in a way that avoids further litigation. Ms. Kessler, he looked at me, you're seeking sale or buyout. Yes. He turned to Macy. Ms. Kessler, you're willing to buy her out. She shrugged, depends on the price. He raised an eyebrow. Have you made an offer? $390,000, she said coolly. I laughed once, a sharp breath. You mean the house I never wanted to own that you bought with my name? Legally, she snapped, you do own it, and you're profiting from that. I'm surviving it. The mediator held up a hand. Let's keep this constructive. I leaned forward. $450K, that's my price, no negotiation. Macy smirked. That's above market. Not when you factor in the damages, emotional, legal, professional. Her lawyer leaned in to whisper. She looked at me like I'd spit in her drink. But then she nodded. Fine, she said, you'll get your money. The agreement was drawn up within the hour. She signed with a flourish, like it didn't mean anything. I signed with a shaking hand. We walked out without speaking. But as I stepped into the parking lot, she called after me. You think you won, she said. I turned slowly. No, I know I walked away with my name. She didn't reply. She just stood there blinking into the wind, and for the first time, I saw her without the mask. Not angry. Not smug. Just small. And then I drove away. But what I didn't know was that she wasn't done. Because 3 weeks later, I'd learned that Macy hadn't just stolen my identity for a house. She turned me into a brand. And what she did next was the most personal violation of all. The first time I saw the brochure, I thought it was a mistake. It arrived in my mailbox 2.5 weeks after Macy signed the buyout agreement. I was still adjusting to the strange quiet that followed a long legal battle. No calls from Martin, no court dates on my calendar, no angry texts from Macy, just silence. I thought the storm had passed. But that morning, there it was, a glossy, trifold mailer with a pale blue sea glass background and golden cursive lettering. Welcome to the Kessler House, Coastal Recovery and Renewal. I stood in my apartment's entryway, frozen. I hadn't even opened it yet. My name, our name, was printed across the front in oversized gold foil, the Kessler House. I unfolded the brochure with trembling fingers. Photos of the beach house filled the inside, beautiful edited shots of the sun setting behind the deck, driftwood-themed decor, aromatherapy candles, a fully stocked tea bar. But what made my mouth go dry was the second panel. There it was. A headshot. My headshot. A photo I hadn't seen in years from my old graduate school directory, back when I still had bangs and wore oversized glasses. The caption underneath read, Dr. Delaney Kessler, Ph.D., founder, environmental recovery specialist. Healing starts with the sea, the breath, and the balance of earth. I dropped the brochure. It fluttered to the ground, landing face up on the coffee table. I stared at it for a long time, pulse roaring in my ears. She hadn't just used my name for paperwork. She had turned me into a fictional character. A coastal brand. A fake doctor running a fake wellness home, built on the foundation of my identity. I scrambled for my laptop and typed the URL at the bottom of the brochure. www.thekesslerhouse.co. The site loaded instantly. Polished, professional, lined with fake testimonials from patients, serene images of yoga mats and essential oil diffusers. It even included a message from Dr. Kessler at the top of the homepage. After recovering from personal loss, I knew I needed to build something healing. This house represents that journey. I invite you to experience your own renewal here. I scrolled horrified. There were rates listed $750 night, discounts for long-term therapeutic retreats, a link to an Airbnb listing, now offline but archived, dozens of glowing reviews all praising Dr. Kessler's story and how the energy of the home helped me reconnect to myself. She hadn't just profited from me. She had erased me, replaced me with a fantasy. I called Martin immediately. He answered on the first ring. Tell me you're not calling because she forged something else. Worse, I whispered. She made me a fake doctor. She's marketing a wellness brand using my name, my photo, and a completely fabricated biography. There was a pause. That's not just fraud, that's impersonation, misrepresentation, identity commercialization, and if people paid for services under that name, we're entering serious federal territory. I didn't authorize any of it, I said, packing the room. Do you have proof it's her? She owns the LLC. The site is registered to her email alias. I have the brochure, the website screenshots. I'll send everything. He exhaled through his nose. Delaney, this is a major escalation. She's not just misusing your name, she's branding it. That's violation of your likeness, your professional identity, and likely even your social security data. We can bring in a reputation protection specialist. Do it, I said. He did. Within 2 days, we had a team analyzing her site, tracing domain purchases, digging through public filings. Everything pointed back to the same shell company, Kessler Collective LLC, founded in Nevada, managed by Holland Reed, operations officer. I blinked. Holland, I asked, the same woman who gave me the letter. Martin nodded. She's not involved anymore. We reached out. She said Macy used her name briefly when registering and then changed the listing without permission. But we got a statement. She's willing to testify again. I thought I had reached my limit with Macy. But this was new territory. I filed a takedown request with the web host. The site vanished within 48 hours. So did the Airbnb listing. But the damage wasn't done yet. Because 5 days later, I received a message on LinkedIn from a woman named Ariel who had stayed at the beach house. Hi Delaney, I know this might be strange, but I wanted to reach out. I stayed at the Kessler house a few months ago and just saw your name mentioned in a post online. The woman who ran the house, I think she was your sister, told us it was built by you, that you were a marine biologist recovering from cancer. That's why we booked it. I stared at the message, hard in my throat. Cancer. Marine biology. She hadn't just stolen my name. She had rewritten my life. I called Ariel. She confirmed everything, even forwarded me the digital welcome book that had been sent to guests with a fake bio, a fake email, a signature line signed Dr. D. Kessler. When I hung up, I sat on my couch and cried for the first time in weeks. Not because I was scared, but because I felt violated in a way that went beyond money, beyond legality. It was like she had crawled into my skin and decided she could wear me better. Martin filed a cease and desist. We notified the state licensing board, flagged the issue with consumer protection, and filed a formal claim for identity-based business fraud. But I knew what came next. Macy would retaliate. And she did. Not with a call, not with a message, but with a complaint. My employer called me in for a routine review. Someone had submitted a claim to their ethics board, alleging that I had misrepresented my identity and engaged in dual business ventures under false credentials. It was an anonymous complaint, but I didn't need a signature to know who sent it. It was Macy, trying to sink the one part of my life she hadn't already touched, my career. I handed them everything, Martin's letters, the court ruling, the screenshots, the takedown order. It worked. They cleared me within 3 days. But I saw the doubt in their eyes. The questions behind the smiles. It was enough to rattle my peace. That's when I knew silence wouldn't save me. The only way to take back my identity fully was to own it again. So I went public. Not with anger, not with drama. Just truth. I recorded a video, simple, straight. Me sitting at my desk, looking into the camera. My name is Delaney Kessler. I'm a real person. I'm not a doctor. I never opened a wellness retreat. My sister used my name to purchase a house, to build a brand, and to profit off a life I never lived. But I'm taking it back. And if this has happened to you, know you're not alone. I uploaded it to Medium. Linked it to a local Charleston women's legal forum. And then I waited. It spread fast. Support poured in. Stories poured in. Other women, other sisters, other betrayals. And with every message, I felt a layer of shame peel off my skin. Macy didn't own me anymore. She had impersonated me. But the world was finally meeting the real me. Delaney, not Dr. Kessler. Not the victim. The survivor. But what I didn't know was that buried in all of this was one document, one signature, that would expose the real reason Macy had done all of it. And when I found it, The truth would shatter everything I thought I knew about my own inheritance. I don't remember the moment I opened the envelope. I just remember my fingers were already trembling before I realized what I was holding. It had arrived late one Thursday afternoon, long after the mail should have come. I'd had a rough day, a canceled client call, a second round of blood work for an ongoing fatigue issue, and the silent, gnawing presence of Macy still lurking at the edges of my world like a shadow I couldn't shake. I wasn't expecting anything important. Maybe a tax form, a catalog. But the envelope was different. Cream-colored, heavy, no return address. Just my full name handwritten in tight, clean script, not Macy's handwriting but still familiar. The postmark was Charleston, no stamp, hand-delivered through the postal system. Inside, a single page. It took me a moment to realize it was from my mother's estate file. The letterhead was her old attorney's. My breath caught in my throat. I unfolded it slowly. At the top, bolded and underlined. Addendum to the Kessler Survivorship Trust, dated March 27th, year. I blinked. I'd never seen this before. Not once in all the paperwork Macy had claimed to handle after Mom died, and it wasn't in the records Martin had accessed. The paragraph was short, plain, but devastating. It is my wish that should either of my daughters possess sole ownership of property acquired through shared assets or names, the other be entitled to equal compensation or ownership rights. And beneath it, Macy's signature, dated 7 days after Mom died. I stood in the center of my living room, the letter trembling in my hands, the air suddenly thick. I sat down hard on the floor. I read it again. And again. It didn't make sense, not at first. Why would Macy sign a document like this after Mom had passed? And why hadn't it been included in the official will proceedings? Unless she'd meant to use it. Leverage it. Or bury it. I called Martin immediately. He answered on the first ring. You need to come in, I said. By the next morning, the letter was under a forensic light in Martin's conference room, next to my laptop and a mug of untouched coffee. He wore gloves as he examined the paper. This wasn't in the court file, he said, confirming what I already feared. It was drafted by the estate attorney but never submitted for record. If Macy signed it after your mother died, that signature means nothing legally, unless she forged it to look pre-death. But it's in her handwriting. He glanced at me. You're sure it's hers? I'd bet my life on it. Martin sent it to a handwriting analyst, and within 48 hours we had confirmation. It was Macy's. The ink and paper matched stationery from the attorney's office at the time. It was real. But then things got even stranger. Our analyst found faint indentations on the back, like there had once been a second page. It had been removed. That detail stuck in my brain like a splinter. Someone had mailed me a partial document, not the full thing. So who? And why? The pieces clicked together late one night when I was scrolling through old contacts from Mom's medical binder. I saw a name I hadn't thought about in almost a year. Holland Reed, the paralegal who worked at the law office that handled Mom's initial estate paperwork. The same woman Macy had briefly listed on the LLC documents. The same one who later handed me the first letter that blew this all open. I emailed her. It was short, just a single line. Did you send the addendum? She replied 2 hours later. Meet me at Angel Oak Thursday, 5 p.m. Bring the letter. I showed up early. The tree was already casting massive shadows across the forest floor, its limbs like knotted arms reaching in every direction, rooted in time and truth. Holland sat on a bench beneath it, casual and calm, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She gave me a tired smile when I sat down. I didn't think you'd come alone, she said. I didn't think you'd be here at all. We sat in silence for a moment. Then I pulled the letter from my bag and placed it on her lap. Why now? She didn't answer right away. Then, because I couldn't carry it anymore, not after what she did to you, not after watching your name get dragged through her performance. I thought maybe if I gave you part of it, you'd come looking for the rest. I swallowed. So there is more. She nodded, reached into her bag. Pulled out a photocopy. It was the missing second page. And this time it wasn't typed. It was written in my mother's handwriting. To Delaney, you have always seen clearly, even when I couldn't. If anything ever seems wrong, trust your instincts. Macy means well, but she gets lost. If she ever takes from you, take it back, not out of spite, out of balance. My breath caught. I hadn't heard my mother's voice in over a year, but suddenly it was in my ears, quiet, steady, loving. I've had this page in my drawer since your mother passed, Holland said quietly. Macy asked us to discard the addendum, said your mother changed her mind before she died. The partner agreed, but I couldn't do it. Something felt off. I made a copy. I waited. Why now? I asked again, my throat raw. She looked at me. Because you were brave enough to fight, and that's what your mother would have wanted. I nodded, unable to speak. I took the page, framed it, hung it in my apartment that night next to the court ruling. Because that letter, those words, were the proof I never knew I needed. Not just of Macy's lies, but of my own sanity, of my mother's belief in me. And yet, even with that clarity, the road ahead was full of shadows. Martin called the next morning. I've gone through the original trust documents again, he said. There's a clause, a hidden one buried in the survivor's access section. It ties real estate holdings to asset unlocks. I frowned. So, he said, Macy didn't use your name just to own a house. She used it to trigger full access to the trust. Without you, she couldn't unlock the funds. My stomach turned. You're saying she didn't just steal your identity for fun, she used you to unlock a $2.4 million inheritance. Silence. Then Martin added softly, you weren't the victim of a property scam, Delaney. You were the centerpiece of a long con. I sank into my chair, every cell in my body going cold. The house had been the bait. The trust was the trap. Macy hadn't planned this overnight. She had known the structure of Mom's trust, and she had built a plan around exploiting it the moment she realized I wouldn't fight back. Except I did. And now I had the documents, the testimony, the motive, and my mother's blessing. For the first time since it all began, I didn't feel afraid of Macy. I felt ready to do what my mother had asked. Take it back. Not out of spite. Out of balance. The day I decided to fight for sole control of the trust, it wasn't about revenge. It was about repair. Not just of my finances or reputation, but of something deeper, my own sense of worth, which Macy had quietly dismantled one betrayal at a time. Martin sat across from me, legal pad in hand, his pen tapping softly as I outlined what I wanted. I want her removed from the trust, from any access to my name, from everything. He didn't blink. Then we're going to need more than emotion. We need pattern, evidence of manipulation, attempts to override your autonomy. I nodded. She tried to file a psychiatric evaluation. He looked up. You never told me that. I didn't think it went anywhere. We need that report. If she used your medical history to argue mental instability, we can prove she was trying to claim sole trustee rights by declaring you unfit. I pulled out my laptop and opened the digital copy I'd downloaded months ago, too sickened to look at it for more than a glance. Martin read through it line by line, expression hardening. She filed this 5 months after your mother died. I was grieving. She framed it as delusion, said you were exhibiting hallucinations of persecution. I swallowed hard because I said she was manipulating me. He closed the file slowly. We're using this. She withdrew the request once you contested the house, but that doesn't erase her intent. Intent. That was the word that followed me for weeks. I found it hidden in her emails, in the letter she forged, in the shell companies she buried under fake names and fabricated bios. Every choice she made wasn't spontaneous. It was structured, strategic. She didn't just hurt me. She tried to erase me. Martin filed the petition with the probate court. The case to remove Macy as co-trustee was set for review in 45 days. I didn't know how she'd react. Until she did. It started small. An email from one of my clients, a cryptic note saying they were pausing all development conversations due to ethical concerns. I reached out confused, blindsided. They forwarded me a tip submitted anonymously to the city zoning board, accusing me of insider favoritism, unauthorized land access, and undeclared business holdings. It was ridiculous. And textbook Macy. I gave the report to Martin, who shook his head. She's trying to discredit you before the hearing, typical. But it didn't stop there. Next came a LinkedIn message from an old mentor, warning me that someone had reached out asking for personal verification of Delaney's mental health following family-related legal complications. Then came a fake Yelp review on True Title's page, calling me erratic, borderline unstable, and not trustworthy around confidential data. It was relentless. Like a campaign. And then it got worse. My HR department at work called me in. Someone had submitted a formal ethics complaint, alleging that I was abusing company data to further private investigations. Martin was livid. She's trying to poison your livelihood. If we can link these reports back to her, we can prove a coordinated attempt to undermine your credibility. He filed a subpoena to trace the IPs behind the anonymous complaints. The court granted it. And within 2 weeks we had confirmation. 3 of the reports came from the same VPN service. Registered to Kessler Equity Group LLC. Macy. Her fingerprints were all over it. We submitted the findings to the probate judge, along with a full breakdown of her digital sabotage. Then we waited. The court hearing was scheduled for the first Monday of October. I didn't sleep the night before. I kept going over every piece of evidence in my head, every voicemail, every document. Every time I doubted myself, cried in the dark, or asked if I was making things worse by not letting go. But I remembered the letter. My mother's voice penned in ink. If she ever takes from you, take it back, not out of spite, out of balance. When I walked into the courtroom, I wasn't afraid. I wore a dark blue blazer and a plain white blouse. No makeup, no armor. Just the truth. Macy was already seated. She didn't look up as I passed her. Her lawyer sat stiffly beside her, young, uncomfortable. He looked like he knew what was coming. Martin began our argument with poise. He outlined every act of deception, from the forged identity to the conservatorship attempt, to the LLC scams, the defamation efforts, and the impersonation of a medical professional using my photo. Then he submitted the final exhibit. The letter. My mother's words. Typed on one page, handwritten on the next. The judge read both aloud. I watched Macy's face. Her jaw was locked, eyes unblinking, a statue of pride. But for the first time in a long time, she looked small to me. When it was her turn to respond, her lawyer tried to frame it all as misunderstanding born out of grief. He said Macy had acted out of urgency and emotion, that she never intended harm. I held back a scoff. Then the judge asked if Macy would like to speak. She stood slowly. Her voice was steady but icy. I did what I thought was right. I protected the family's legacy. I created something beautiful when no one else had the courage to act. She glanced at me, a long, loaded look. She never had vision, I did. The judge nodded slowly, then he leaned forward. I've reviewed all the documents, heard all testimony. And I see not just a pattern of deception but a deliberate attempt to displace a co-beneficiary from her legal rights. He looked at me. Ms. Kessler, I grant your petition. He looked at Macy. Effective immediately, you are removed from all access and decision-making authority related to the Kessler Survivorship Trust. Further misuse will result in civil penalties and potential criminal referral. I didn't breathe until I left the courthouse. Outside, the air was warm and sharp with salt. I looked up at the sky, cloudless bright. And for the first time in 2 years, I felt weightless. Not because she was punished, but because I had finally reclaimed what was mine. Not out of spite. Out of balance. The irony of victory is that it rarely feels like triumph. The morning after the judge granted me sole control of the trust, I expected some wave of satisfaction to hit. Maybe peace. Maybe pride. Instead, I sat on my balcony in my faded college sweatshirt, coffee gone cold in my hands, staring blankly at the Charleston skyline. The emails kept coming, congratulations from Martin's assistant, a note from the reputation firm we'd hired, even a DM from a stranger who'd followed my story online and wrote, "You inspire me to take my voice back." But I didn't feel inspiring. I felt hollow. Because winning against your sister in court doesn't undo the childhood birthdays, the family trips, the late-night whispers in twin beds. It doesn't give you back what you lost. It only proves that you were right to leave it behind. Still, I needed closure, not just legal, emotional. So I wrote her a letter. Not to send. Just to say everything I knew she would never let me say in person. Macy, you used my name like it was a spare key. You picked the lock on my life and rearranged the furniture. And the worst part isn't the money or the lies, it's that I don't think you ever really saw me. Not as a sister. Not as a person. Just as a tool. And maybe I let you for too long. But now I see myself clearly. And I don't need you to do it anymore. I folded it and tucked it into my journal. Then I began the real work. Rebuilding. True Title took off in a way I hadn't expected. After my story went public, women from all over reached out, asking for help, advice, consultations. Some were small cases, questions about deeds, ownership disputes, or hidden clauses in family wills. Others were massive, multi-million-dollar estates wrapped in sibling politics and generational manipulation. I took them all. I listened. And with every woman I helped, I stitched a little more of myself back together. Still, I knew Macy wasn't done. She never accepted silence. So when the certified letter arrived 2 months later, I wasn't surprised. It came from a newly formed LLC in Nevada, Kessler Equity Group, the same name tied to the anonymous reports and fake online campaigns. Inside was a cease and desist. Formal threatening hollow. You are hereby ordered to remove any reference to Ms. Macy Kessler or associated parties from all online, professional, or media platforms, or face legal consequences. Martin laughed when I showed him. She's panicking, he said. You cut off her supply. But something about the wording struck me. It wasn't defensive. It was desperate. A week later, I got a call from a lawyer in Las Vegas, not Macy, but someone investigating her. Ms. Kessler, he said, I'm representing a client who leased property from your sister under false pretenses. She used your name in the contract. I closed my eyes. She said she was acting as your legal representative, he continued. Claimed you were abroad and unable to sign. We now know that wasn't true. I sat very still. How much did she take? $80,000 in investor deposits, disappeared a month ago. The ache in my stomach returned like an old injury. This wasn't just identity theft anymore. This was identity weaponization. And even though I'd cut her off legally, she was still using my name in circles that didn't know she'd been disowned by the trust. Martin filed a formal criminal referral. So did the Las Vegas firm. The wheels of real justice began turning. Slowly, but steadily. That night, I walked along the Battery seawall and let the wind hit my face. I watched the lights blink from the harbor, heard laughter from a passing tour boat, felt the hum of a city I had almost lost in the noise of survival. And I asked myself, if this never ends, if Macy never stops, what do I do? The answer surprised me. I live. I build. I become so loud in my own voice that hers fades into the background noise. That's what I did next. I launched a new division of True Title, one specifically for women facing identity-based estate abuse. I partnered with a financial advisor and a trauma-informed counselor. We hosted webinars, created toolkits, formed a coalition. And then I was asked to speak at a national women's law conference. Standing on that stage, I looked out over a sea of faces and said, I once thought my name was only safe when no one knew it. But silence is what abusers rely on. Today, I stand in the full power of my identity because I took it back. Not out of spite. Out of balance. The crowd stood. Clapped. Some cried. And for the first time, I did too. Not from pain, but from pride. 2 months later, a detective from Nevada called. They had enough to issue an arrest warrant for Macy. fraud, false representation, contract impersonation. When I hung up the phone, I didn't cheer. I didn't call anyone. I just sat in the quiet. Because even justice feels like grief when it wears your sister's face. I don't know where Macy is now. She never responded to the charges. Never tried to contact me again. The last time I saw her name was in a footnote buried in a financial fraud advisory bulletin. And I let it go. Not because she deserved it, but because I did. I still wear my mother's bracelet. Still read her notes sometimes before bed. Still whisper her words when I feel the fear creeping back. If she ever takes from you, take it back, not out of spite, out of balance. And now, I live in balance. Not perfect, but mind. The seasons shifted while I rebuilt my life. Autumn softened Charleston's edges with cool breezes and golden light, and I started waking up without dread in my chest. It was strange at first, peace. The silence of not being stalked by email alerts or unknown numbers. But it also felt fragile, like walking across ice, not sure if it could hold me yet. I threw myself into work. The new True Title division flourished, and I found myself mentoring younger women who had lost their voices inside inheritance disputes, predatory siblings, or partners who used trust and identity like weapons. Every time I heard a familiar story, the manipulation, the self-doubt, the gaslighting, I wanted to scream. But instead I listened. And then I showed them how to fight. One woman, Leela, told me her brother had drained her bank account by pretending to be her in a trust reassignment. She said, "I didn't even know you could fight family like that." I told her, "You're not fighting family, you're fighting control dressed in family's clothing." She cried. I did too. We both knew what it meant to lose someone you once loved to something darker, not addiction, not violence, but ambition. Raw, relentless ambition that had no room for empathy. That was Macy. And then, in the middle of everything, something I never expected happened. A letter arrived from the Office of Restitution and Victim Compensation. It was thin, just a few pages. But inside was a formal acknowledgement of financial harm done to me by Delaney Kessler in connection with her fraudulent activities. She had been found in default. Her accounts frozen. And a portion of the trust money, nearly $300,000, had been traced to one of her shell corporations and reclaimed. The government offered me first priority for reimbursement. It felt surreal. I read the line twice before I understood what it meant. After everything, after all the lies and lawsuits and slander, the money she tried to steal was coming back to me. Martin called me that afternoon. "Ironic, isn't it?" he said. "She tried to use you to unlock the trust, and now the only reason you're getting that money is because of what she stole." "It doesn't feel like winning," I said softly. "No," he said, "it feels like justice, and justice is rarely loud." The wire hit my account the next week. $298,600.11. I stared at the balance, blinking. Not because I needed the money, but because I'd spent 2 years wondering if I'd ever feel whole again. I didn't spend $1 of it right away. Instead, I started writing. Not reports, not legal briefs, but my story. The full, brutal, unfiltered truth, from the day the mortgage mailer showed up to the courtroom victories, to the quiet walks under Charleston's live oaks when I questioned whether I even deserved peace. I posted it to True Title's blog. It went viral. Again, but this time not as a scandal. As a blueprint. Thousands of women read it, hundreds reached out, and slowly a movement began to form, not of vengeance but of reclamation. A chorus of women reclaiming not just money or property but self. I called it the Balance Project. A safe space. A resource hub. A support network for women betrayed by family under the disguise of legacy and wealth. And then one day, something happened I never thought I'd see again. A package arrived. No note, no label. Inside was a photo album. Old leather-bound, cracked. It was mine. One I hadn't seen since Mom passed. Macy must have taken it after the funeral. Inside were pictures of us as children. Halloween costumes. Christmas morning. Us on the beach, tiny, tan, grinning, our mother in the background holding orange sodas in both hands. The last photo made me stop. It was of Macy and me on my 13th birthday. She had her arm around me. I was holding a book, smiling shyly. On the back, in our mother's handwriting, "Two girls, one fierce, one kind, may they grow stronger together." I pressed the page to my chest and sobbed. Because I knew what the package meant. Macy wasn't apologizing. But she was letting go. And that was enough. I didn't call her. Didn't write back. That silence for once was sacred. 6 months later, I was invited to speak at a real estate ethics conference. The panel was called "When Bloodlines Cross Boundaries." I told my story. The whole thing. People gasped, some took notes, some just stared. Afterward, a man approached me. Gray-haired, nervous. He said, "I watched my daughter go through something like that. I told her to let it go, that family is family, but now I know I was wrong." I squeezed his hand. "Tell her it's okay to fight for herself." He nodded, eyes glassy. That night, I stood in my hotel room, phone buzzing with messages, and opened my journal. I turned to the letter I had written to Macy. And I added one line at the end. "I forgive you. Not for you. For me." Then I closed the book, turned off the light, and slept finally without fear. I hadn't heard from Macy in over a year. The silence was a strange kind of peace. Like living in a house with a door that had finally been locked, no more footsteps behind it, no more whispers through the cracks. I kept wondering if that door would burst open again, if she'd show up with some new scheme, some fresh way to twist my life around her needs. But she didn't. And slowly I stopped listening for it. Instead, I built. The Balance Project evolved into something bigger than I ever imagined. What started as a blog and hotline soon became a registered nonprofit. We offered free consultations, emotional support groups, and partnered with legal clinics to help women fight identity abuse within families. The number of stories coming in was staggering: sisters, brothers, even mothers manipulating trusts and assets with such casual cruelty that it almost felt cultural. I began to realize something that haunted me. My story wasn't rare. It was just finally being told. Still, as much as I grew outward, building, leading, guiding others, something in me stayed quiet. A piece of my heart sealed off behind glass. I didn't date. I didn't talk about Macy unless it was behind a podium or in service of another woman's healing. Until a man named Jonah walked into my life. He was a financial analyst on a joint seminar panel we hosted through a local university. Kind eyes, warm voice, the kind of humor that wasn't loud, just gentle. After the panel, he approached me. "I've never heard someone speak like that," he said. "Like you were stitching something shut while also holding it wide open." I blinked. "That's oddly specific." He grinned. "Yeah, I do words sometimes, not just spreadsheets." We had coffee the next morning. Then lunch a week later. Then dinner. I didn't tell him about Macy right away. Not because I was hiding, but because I didn't want her shadow to walk in before I did. But one night, sitting across from him at a quiet rooftop bar, I said it. My sister tried to erase me. He didn't flinch. He just waited. "She stole my name," I said, "bought property with it, turned me into a fake doctor to sell rental homes, tried to have me declared mentally unfit, all to access a family trust." I looked down at my hands. And I let it go on longer than I should have, because I loved her, because I thought if I stayed small, she'd stop taking. He reached across the table and placed his hand over mine. "She didn't break you," he said, "she revealed you." That night, I told him everything. And he stayed. In the months that followed, Jonah and I grew slowly, carefully. He never pushed, never questioned my moments of withdrawal, the nights I couldn't sleep because I had a dream she was back, standing outside my apartment with a forged document and a crooked smile. He just held space. And slowly I filled it. One day, while going through an old box of Mom's belongings, I found a letter I didn't remember reading. It was buried inside the flap of a manila folder, wrapped in an old scarf. The envelope read, "To be opened if we fall apart." My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a handwritten note. My mother's cursive was shaky, probably from her final weeks, but still recognizable. Delaney, if you're reading this, then something broke between you and Macy. I want to tell you what I could never say out loud. She was always louder, brighter, and you let her be. But you are the root, the steady one. If she pulled too hard, I'm sorry I didn't stop her. If she took from you, I'm sorry I didn't see it in time. You were never meant to carry silence. You were meant to lead. And I know deep in my soul that you will do it with more grace than I ever did. I held the letter to my chest and sobbed. Because sometimes healing doesn't come from justice. It comes from being seen. Later that week, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. Nevada area code. I almost let it ring out. But something told me to answer. Hello. A pause, then a familiar voice, quieter, older, hollow. Delaney. My throat tightened. Macy. I'm not calling to start anything. I stayed silent. I saw your name on a news feature about the nonprofit. You looked, she stopped herself. You looked like Mom. That broke me in half. I leaned against the counter. What do you want? I asked softly but firmly. To say, I know I ruined everything, and I don't expect forgiveness, but I'm not running anymore. I'm going to court. I've hired someone. I'm going to settle the Nevada charges. I closed my eyes. Why are you telling me? Because it was never about having you, she said. It was about needing what you had. What did I have? She hesitated. Stillness, clarity, the things I could never earn, so I tried to take them. Silence stretched between us. Then she said, there's a check coming your way, part of the restitution order. It won't fix what I broke, but maybe it'll remind you I know you deserved better. I didn't say thank you. I didn't say goodbye. I just hung up and cried for a long, long time. Not because I wanted her back, but because I was finally letting go. A few months later, I stood in front of the Balance Project staff during our annual retreat. We were in Asheville, mountain air, soft fog, red leaves crunching underfoot. I looked at them, 20 women, all survivors, now advocates. And I said, I lost my sister, but I found myself. And I learned that healing doesn't mean you erase what happened. It means you stop letting it speak for you. They clapped. Then we went around and shared our wins. Some had just testified in court, others had helped mothers reclaim assets for their daughters. And me, I had finally bought my own home. Not the beach house. Not something inherited or stolen or forged. Just a little blue house on a quiet Charleston street, with lemon trees in the backyard and space for bookshelves I built myself. I named it quietly, privately, Balance. And every morning, I walk through that front door with my own key. My name on the deed. No ghosts at the table. Just sunlight. And the sound of a future that is finally fully mine. Owning something with your name on it, really owning it, does something to your soul. It settles the parts of you that once felt like they had to shrink just to survive. The little blue house on Rutledge Avenue was nothing grand. 2 bedrooms, a creaky porch, a clawfoot tub that chipped like tissue if you weren't careful. But it was mine. Every screw, every chipped paint swatch, every lemon tree that bloomed and dropped fruit like golden gifts in the grass. I painted the mailbox myself, just one word on it. Kessler. No first name, no doctor, no LLC, no lies. And I told myself quietly every time I came home, this is what healing looks like, not perfection, but peace. Still, healing has its own ghosts. One day, while organizing boxes in the attic, I found a half-unsealed envelope wedged between the floorboards. It wasn't mine. At first, I thought it was from the previous owner, maybe a forgotten tax form or letter. But when I opened it, my knees buckled. Inside was a handwritten will. Dated years before our mother passed. Not a final will, but a draft. One that outlined a drastically different distribution than the one we'd ultimately been given. In this version, Macy was never listed as co-trustee. It was just me. It listed specifics. To Delaney, the entirety of the real estate portfolio in trust with optional division at her discretion. To Macy, the equity accounts, pending behavior and contribution toward family caretaking. Pending behavior. It stunned me, because it meant at one point, Mom had planned for all of it to be mine. Not out of favoritism, but out of reason. Out of pattern. She must have seen something in Macy even then. Martin looked over the draft later and confirmed it. This was overwritten by the final version, but it shows intent, and it might explain why Macy fought so hard. She knew this draft existed. She must have found it, I said, and realized her position was more fragile than she let on. Martin nodded. I think she always knew. That's why she tried to cement herself so fast after your mom passed. The LLC, the beach house, the fake career. She wasn't just stealing from you. She was rewriting the past before it could catch up to her. And just like that, the anger I thought I had buried flickered back to life. Because it wasn't just theft. It was premeditated insecurity. She saw me as a threat because I wasn't trying to win. And she knew if she didn't act fast, the truth would pick her apart. But I didn't let it consume me. I filed the draft away not for court, not for revenge. Just to remember that I wasn't crazy. That my mother had seen me. Around this time, the Balance Project was nominated for a national award in advocacy. I was asked to fly to New York and speak at a summit on inheritance law reform. I stood in a room of strangers, judges, attorneys, counselors, and told the full story. Every part. Even the final phone call from Macy. Even the letter I found in the attic. Even the part where I admitted, I still miss her. Not the version who stole from me, but the version who used to make me laugh so hard I choked on orange soda. People cried. Some took notes. One woman, a federal judge, approached me after and said, "Your story is the reason I'll never treat a family fraud case the same way again." I boarded the flight home with something bigger than closure. Purpose. Jonah and I grew stronger with time. He never asked me to move faster than I could. Some nights we'd sit on the porch, legs tangled, just listening to the crickets while he asked me questions about my mom, about what the house was like before Macy turned it into a lie. And one night, after a long silence, he said, "Would you ever go back?" I looked at him to the beach house. He nodded. "I don't know," I whispered. "I haven't been there since the trial. Maybe that's where the last of it lives." He was right. A few weeks later, I drove back to the shoreline. Alone. The house was still there, though it had changed. The new owners had painted the shutters green and replaced the front swing with a hanging chair made of woven rope. It was no longer the Kessler house, just a summer rental called Sea Balance. I stood across the street for a long time watching it. And then I walked up the drive, heart hammering in my chest, and knocked. A woman answered. Polite in her 40s, friendly eyes. "I'm sorry to bother you," I said. "I used to have family connected to this place. I just wanted to see it one last time." She paused, then opened the door wider. "Come on in." I stepped over the threshold. The air smelled like linen and ocean salt. The living room had been rearranged, no more driftwood decor, no more fake yoga mats, just soft rugs, clean furniture, quiet light. And then tucked in the corner I saw it. A shelf. With a single framed photo still left behind. Me. From the old brochure. But someone had scratched out the doctor and written below it in careful cursive. Delaney survivor, truth-teller, founder. I stared. The woman noticed and said, "Oh, we kept that. People always asked about the house's story. When I learned the truth, I thought we should honor it." I swallowed back tears. Because sometimes healing finds you in places you thought were forever tainted. I walked out of that house later. Back in Charleston, life kept blooming. Jonah proposed under the lemon trees. Simple, quiet, just us. He said, "You taught me that identity is sacred. Let's build one together." I said yes. We married under the live oaks, vows whispered beneath the Spanish moss, not a single guest we didn't trust with our full selves. Even Martin cried. And when we signed our names on the marriage license, I kept mine. Not because I didn't love Jonah, but because I had fought like hell to get my name back. And I would never give it away again. The morning after our wedding, the world felt still. Not empty. Not buzzing. Just quiet. Jonah and I lay tangled in cotton sheets, sunlight slipping in through the linen curtains, the soft rustle of the lemon tree tapping the window like a memory knocking to say, "You made it." No paparazzi, no scandal, no Macy. Just peace. It was strange having nothing to fight. Stranger still, realizing I no longer needed to. I used to think healing came from reclaiming everything someone tried to take, my name, my assets, my pride. But now I saw it differently. Healing was knowing I could have lost everything and still be whole. Jonah and I didn't go on a big honeymoon. We took the train north, slow and scenic. One evening in a little bed-and-breakfast in Virginia, I opened my inbox and saw an unexpected name in the from line. Macy Kessler. No subject. No attachments. Just one sentence. I'm turning myself in. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I was afraid, but because part of me had stopped believing she'd ever do it. The email was sent from a temporary account. I couldn't reply, couldn't ask questions, couldn't ask why. But I didn't need to. Macy always needed control. Even her surrender had to be performed on her terms. Later, I confirmed through a contact in Nevada that she had indeed turned herself in. Her plea deal was accepted. She admitted to fraud, identity theft, impersonation, and forgery. She was sentenced to a reduced term in a rehabilitation facility with mandatory restitution conditions. She would not go to prison. She would, however, spend the next 10 years under legal supervision, barred from accessing credit, filing under false names, or owning businesses without external oversight. It didn't feel like justice, not in the way people imagine it, gavels and orange jumpsuits. But it felt like truth, like something had finally stopped spinning. Back in Charleston, I stood beneath the lemon trees with a basket of fresh-picked fruit, thinking about how much had bloomed in the same soil Macy once tried to poison. I built balance into something that would outlast me. A physical headquarters opened in a restored 1920s Charleston home. The staff grew, the hotline expanded. I trained interns, mentored survivors, wrote a memoir signed in her name, how I took my identity back. It hit the bestseller list within a week. But none of it changed the root of who I was. I was still the girl who found a forged document in her mailbox and almost let it destroy her. Still the woman who cried on her kitchen floor when the world refused to believe what her gut screamed. Still the sister who once believed love meant silence. But now I was also something else. I was a woman who had rewritten her ending. A year after the memoir's release, I was asked to return to the Charleston courthouse. Not as a litigant, not as a witness, but as a keynote speaker at a judicial ethics symposium. I stood at the same podium where I once shook under the weight of Macy's lies, and I read a quote from my mother's handwritten letter. "You were never meant to carry silence. You were meant to lead." Then I looked out at the audience of judges, lawyers, clerks, and survivors. And I said, "We often say blood is thicker than water. But what we forget is that water flows where it's allowed. And blood can drown you just the same. Family can be love, but it can also be control. And when someone uses your name like a weapon, you don't just take it back. You sharpen it into a sword." The room went silent. Then they stood, applauded, cried. Not for me. For themselves. Because every person in that room had either lived my story or unknowingly ruled against someone who had. I never saw Macy again. The last I heard, she was working at a nonprofit in Utah, rebuilding her own life in the shadows of her choices. Part of me wanted to visit. To ask her why. To ask her when the sister I loved had disappeared, if she even remembered when she'd traded laughter for leverage. But I didn't. Because I realized something crucial. Closure is a door you choose to close. Not one the other person has to walk through. On my 34th birthday, Jonah threw a party in the lemon grove behind our house. Just a few friends, staff, former clients who had become sisters. We danced under string lights, ate lemon cake, told stories. At one point, someone asked me, "What would you say to the version of you from 2 years ago, the one standing in front of a forged real estate contract, confused and shaking?" I smiled, glass of wine in hand, and said, "I'd tell her she's not broken. that she's about to become the most powerful version of herself. And that one day her name, the same name someone tried to steal, will become a lifeline for thousands of women just like her. There was silence, then laughter, then applause. And as the night wound down, Jonah took my hand and walked me out toward the tree where he'd first kissed me. We stood there barefoot in the grass, the moonlight catching the curls of my hair. "I never knew what strength looked like until you," he whispered. I touched his cheek. "And I never knew what peace felt like until you." He kissed me. And in that moment I knew. It was over. The war. The wounds. The waiting. The story that began with a lie in my name had ended with a life I built proudly, loudly, irrevocably in my truth.